I am truly amazed at what we accomplished in just one day and a couple of minutes with my horses.
We took this horse from almost the point where I was ready to put him down for fear that he'd hurt someone to a horse that's really become very functional.
Kevin Wescott is the best thing that ever happened to my horse.
More importantly, he's really helped me think and think about what I'm doing and have a reason for what I ask my horse to do.
He is the most fantastic trainer I have ever worked with.
Today is the third ride, and we're gonna see how he accepts the hobbles today. It's not something we have to do some with him, but it might be useful on helping him to learn to stand still. But you don't want to just teach a horse to stand still with the hobbles. There needs to be some preparation first, which hopefully we've worked on the last few days, which was him coming to a stop on his own and learning to take care of himself. What we want to keep in mind here is anytime you restrain a horse with hobbles or things like that, you run the risk of injury because he can't get away. Until this point, we've always pretty much had a place where he could get away from us, he could move away, he could move around us, and when we put the hobbles on, he's going to be really restricted from doing that. And what we're doing here is just pulling around on his feet some in preparation for that. And we'll just put him in a little bit more of a bind here with the rope around both legs. And this is confusing to him because he doesn't understand that. The few times he's been caught, he's most generally been asked to lead or to follow somebody. And now when he tries that, it doesn't work for him. So Ray and Tom talked about separation. And the horse has to learn to separate what you ask him. So when you ask him something, we'd like to have his mind think before he reacts and think, well, should I do this or should I do that? And try to make that decision so he does what we'd like and also he keeps himself safe. We'll just move him a little bit and then try to help him out of that trouble and be there to support him after he gets in it. But we're going to put the saddle on him here in a second, and we don't want to just put the hobbles on him and step up and throw the saddle on him. We want him to try him out just enough that he doesn't get hurt. And maybe at this point, if we weren't filming, maybe we'd just take the hobbles off, walk him around, go somewhere else and try it out, or not put the hobbles back on for that day. If you're going to turn him loose like that, then if you string your lead rope out in front of him, you might be a little safer to do that, because the last thing we'd want him to do is leave with the lead rope dragging and struggling with the hobbles. The other thing we're going to be pretty careful is when we do go ahead and cinch him up, we're going to be pretty careful and watch and see how he handles being cinched up. And I certainly wouldn't cinch up a horse that I didn't think could handle this, but still we're not going to do it too tight until we get the hobbles off, because we don't want him to have troubles with this saddle with those hobbles on. But we figure we're in pretty good shape here to just kind of do the girth up lightly, and the saddle just kind of be balanced on there, and then we can tighten it up after we take the hobbles off. Now today we're going to ride him without turning him loose. And I wouldn't be in a hurry to do this. Generally what I would do is every day I would turn him loose. Either turn him loose and leave him alone in a big pen with the saddle on, or I'd turn him loose and exercise him with a little bit with another horse, because that way I can ride the other horse too. And then I'd leave him alone a while before I either rode him or unsaddled him. Now, this is a piece of 1/2-inch CPVC water line that you can get at the hardware store or a building center. And then we just duct tape some plastic on there. And I like the feel of it, kind of, because it's not too hard. It's got some give. And even though it looks like sometimes here that we might be tapping pretty hard on this colt, it doesn't sting like a whip, and if you use it hard enough it'll break, so it'll tell you if you're using it too hard. Now we want him to move away from it but continue to go around us, and he hasn't had that feel before. Before, when we asked him to move away, he was able to just leave. Now he has to move away but stay with us. And as we use this around him, we want to use it to make him go, but we want it to stay with him and close to him. And the reason I have it stay with him is because I'm preparing him to ride him with this flag. Because up to this point, we've either been out in the open where he could move out, we've been in the arena or the round pen with another horse to create enough disturbance that we could get the impulsion we needed and we can get him to leave. And we're not going to use another horse today, so we need something to carry with us to make him move. Now, I generally prefer to use a throw rope or a lariat to make him move. It's not quite so frightening to them, and you can use it on the inside, and then you can turn them up alongside their head. But this shows it a little bit better, and so we'll ride him with this when we get ready. But all we're looking for here is a little bit of movement, a little bit of warm-up, a little bit of bend to the inside. And when he gets scared in spots like that, we just go ahead with what we were doing or change what we were doing and ignore it. But this is pretty difficult for him because he's never been lunged before. As I said, he's either been asked to come with you or leave. He's never been asked to leave and then stay with you at the same time. And then we can practice our turns a little bit as we're doing this. And this is what we're going to use to kind of help turning when we get on him. And these are kind of the same things that the other horse was doing when he followed him. Adrian on the other horse would do some of these same things, but still you have to transfer him over to the ground, where before she was up on another horse and I was just holding onto the rein, and then he'd leave with a little bit of direction. And now he's got to kind of stay in that spot next to me all the time. And we've talked about before that close spot there can be kind of difficult when you're just several feet away from him, because the horse is comfortable with you right next to him and he's comfortable out there about 20 feet or so. But that spot in there of just a few feet can be kind of uncomfortable for him. Now, since we kind of got him used to the hobbles a little bit there, we're going to use him a little bit here to bridle him. And we could get him bridled fine without him. We did yesterday. But we'll put them on, and that'll just kind of help him stay there. We'll check his mouth out a little bit before we put the bridle on today, to see how he is about his mouth. Different horses have different little things, and this is a really nice-minded little colt, and really likes to get along well. But whether it was me that kind of started it when I put the bridle in the first time, or if he just kind of had that, he has just a little deal about his mouth. So that's one of those things that we have to kind of go back and pick up. And we wouldn't have to do it today. We could wait several rides, but we'd sure want to keep an eye on that, to where he's bothered by that. If you're going to put your hobbles on, make sure you buckle your halter around his neck. And it's not a bad idea even if you don't put the hobbles on. But as I said before, we don't want him to get away from that. Now we could be done with that string around the bit there. But because of the filming and stuff, if he put his tongue over the bit, I wouldn't want to ride him that way. But I wouldn't want to stop and have to tie it on, so we could leave it on there for a couple rides this way. But like I said before, normally I wouldn't even put it on there, but I'd watch to see if I needed it, and I'd have taken it off before now. And that's why, once again, that you can't listen to somebody else and have them tell you what to do. You have to watch the horse and try to guess what he needs, or what you think he might need. As I said before, we filmed this in September, October, and we're doing this editing here in March. And I'm not sure why I got on this colt with the hobbles on. I don't remember my exact reasoning for showing it on film, because it's not something that I would generally do. But I know that this colt has a little bit of problem that we've created, where he wants to move when we get on. But this is something that a person would want to be real careful in doing, and I don't think that I would recommend it. And you watch as I get on, I get right back off. I certainly wouldn't get on and sit on there and wait for this colt to think he needed to leave. That's the nice thing about this little colt, is that he really likes to leave. He likes to move. And personally, I like one with a little more movement than one that I have to struggle to make move. And as you'll see in a little bit, when we have the flag up on top of him, we get pretty close to getting too much movement, because he gets a little afraid of that flag and he starts to take off. But you'll see what we build into him, especially that first day. And I shouldn't say build into him, because that sounds like we did something. But what we tried to work with was that first day was to bring out his natural courage, we might say, to take care of himself, which was the walk-trot transitions, the horse taking off and learning to come back on his own, where we didn't pull on him. Whenever we could, we wouldn't pull on him. Or I should say, whenever we didn't have to, we didn't pull on him. And of course, when Tyson rode him, he couldn't pull on him, because he could pull as hard on the saddle horn as he wanted, and he wasn't going to be pulling on him. But even though this colt's a little bit scared of that flag, he's trying his best to hang in there. And there I was able to use it to kind of help him slow down, and at the same time kind of stay on the rail. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to keep a young horse out on the edge of the pen. So we can kind of use that to keep him away from the middle. And at the same time we're using it to keep him away from the middle, we can kind of help him look to the inside of the ring, because he tends to want to look to that flag, so we can keep his attention to the inside. I also like to move these colts up when I first ride them from the inside hind leg right there, because I want that leg coming up and under to drive them off. I also want them to come up and under with the inside leg, so their attention once again stays to the inside. And there's that spot where I turned that over to the other side, and he had a real hard time handling that. So we'll let it slow back down. We'll let him get put back together again. And then we're going to try to make that switch. Now we got it to the other side, but we did it in a different way than what we tried at the first. Now we're asking him to go. But we tried to make a switch from left to right with the flag, from left hand to right hand, and we didn't get it done because he got a little too scared and took off. So we made the switch in a different way. And there was just a little bit of flag on the right, even after I got it in my left hand, to keep him from turning back to the right. And then the impulsion from the inside and the inside hind leg to have him come up and move forward. Now it may look a time or two like I've pulled back with both reins, but it's never been my intention, and it looks that way sometimes more than it actually is. The next ride, we're going to start with pulling back with both reins and having the horse come to a stop and back up. But when I used to ride a lot of colts, a lot of times I wouldn't pull back on both reins for 2 weeks. I'd just turn them with one rein and stop them with one rein. And I don't know that I'd call it a stop with one rein, but I would just bend them and let them get soft until they finally stopped. And that's all we're doing there, is we just start to turn him until he stops, and then direct him in the other direction. And that was pretty nice of him. And you see, when we make that switch from left eye to right eye and right eye to left eye, he's still a little uncomfortable about that. Now once the flag comes over and I get it in my left hand here, he's fine. But initially he kind of thinks he needs to leave. And that's okay, because he's not going to go too far in this pen. One of the reasons I use this is I don't like to do too much with my legs right at the start, because they don't have much meaning, because you can't hardly transfer that over from anything else. But we can transfer that flag over from another horse to the ground and then to the horse's back, and he already has a little bit of an understanding to move away from that flag. But it's hard to get on and give him an understanding of your legs right away. And it also gives him pretty good energy, because once they go around this pen a time or two or a day or two, they know they're not getting out and they're not going anywhere. And that was nice of him there. But then you still see when I change that over, he thinks he's got to leave a little bit. But they know they're not going anywhere, so by having something like this, it raises that fear level a little bit, and then you have a way to go and a way to speed up. But you don't dare raise the fear level too far, and you raise it too high, then you may not get it to come back down. So you always try to get it to come back down. Even though he might get scared for a little bit, then you bring him back. And that was the interesting thing that I saw about Ray Hunt. And I don't know if this is what he meant or meant to see, but my interpretation was I'd watch him, and I've always said that he was the master of getting into what looked like a complete wreck and coming out the other side with a horse that was completely calm and relaxed and thought Ray was the best guy in the world. And because of Ray's ability and talent, he could do that. I'm not sure I should get quite so close to a wreck as what Ray did. But I kind of like that. That's kind of my personality, is to get kind of on the edge. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but I enjoy it. I mean, whether it's right or wrong. And that's nice. He came to a really nice stop there. Then I scared him. But he come to a nice stop. But we have the colt has some pretty nice energy, but he has the ability to stop. And you can see that he really wants to move, and he's got just a little bit too much movement. We can kind of lay the reins on the saddle horn here. And then we're going to not use the saddle, or use the reins for a little bit here, and see if we can just kind of direct him with no reins at all. But we, of course, got to be kind of careful, because we have that good movement in this colt, and it wouldn't take much for him to get too much. And then he'd get scared, and then we'd be in trouble. But you see there, at this point, I like to get him loping or cantering, and then let him stop. And that's open for him to stop, and I want those horses to look for an opening to take a break, so that whenever a break is offered, they can take it. And you see he didn't quite take a complete break there. We're asking him to turn to his right, and it's taking him a while to make it so we could change directions. And I've been told that's what the saddle horn's there for, is to hang on to, and I hadn't forgot it. And we got the wrong lead there. And one of the reasons you get the wrong lead, and sometimes it can just happen, but you need to build, and it took me 2/3 of the way around the round pen of asking him to canter before he cantered. He come off nice to the left there and took a little break. Now we're just going to do a few turns here until he can settle down. And you can see we only had one rein there. Sometimes it's a little difficult to tell because I do take the slack out of my other rein just as habit. And so if I'm kind of trying to show that I'm not pulling on the other rein, it's still kind of hard for me not to, but I took my hand off there so I could kind of show that I'm only pulling on one rein. But we just wind that energy down. And one of the things we need to catch this colt up on is bending his head. We haven't done that. Only just a little bit. And it would be nice some point here to get him to where if we pull his head around, he relaxes and doesn't go anywhere. And you can see the movement in him there. He's got just a little bit too much movement. But we'll just sit quiet and wait. And there he came to a stop. But you see he can't hardly stay there. He had to move a little bit. Then we had just a little hesitation, then he walked off. So at some point here we need to build on that hesitation to where that becomes a stand there, relax and soft and quiet. The last thing we want is a whoa, you stand there. Now you watch when we walk off here, we wait on him because I remembered there that he doesn't know much about that bit, so I don't expect to just walk off. There are so many things that I remember Tom Dorrance telling me, and one of the things that he told me is after he'd take the saddle off, he always liked to rub their back a little bit. And I probably don't stay in as good a habit of that as I should. But then when I think about it or talking to other people, I kind of remember it. And the thing about Tom was, it would probably be a little hard to figure out why he would do things. But I never questioned him because they always worked. And he'd tell me to do things, and I'd go do them, and they worked. And I didn't understand them, but they worked. And there's things like that that I still don't understand, but when he told you to do it and you did it, they worked. But the interesting thing about Tom is he didn't tell you this was right or do this because I said it. He would say you might try this. This is the fourth ride. And you can see this colt still moving a little bit when we saddle him and things like that. And it's not that I like that, don't get me wrong, I don't think that's correct. But I'm still not going to be too strict with him. If I wanted to, we'd just stop and kind of work on this specific thing and fix it. But this will go away anyway. As long as it doesn't get any worse than it is, it won't be only a few times and it'll go away. And it doesn't bother me. I don't feel like he's getting away with anything. I don't take it personal. If anything, I would just say to myself that the other 2 or 3 times he's been saddled, I didn't do a good enough job. So I'm willing to take the responsibility here that what I did prior, he didn't understand well enough and I didn't show him well enough, so now he still has to move. But as I've said before, I'd still take that movement over him getting scared or sticking his feet in the ground, because I want to ride him and I want to move. I don't want to just get on and sit on him. And this will go away, maybe even on its own, or we might have to work at it a little bit. And we could certainly go back to the hobbles today and put the hobbles on him before we saddled him, and then he would stand still. Once again, we're waiting on the feet there, and you see it take just a little bit for him to get what we might call untracked, because he had that saddle put on him and tightened up there, and then yesterday he'd had the hobbles, and so he's got to think, can he go or not? You see, this is the first day we've kind of warmed him up a little bit with the bridle on. The last few days we've had a halter on and a flag the last day. But I'm starting to feel pretty comfortable with him that he's not likely to blow up. And he probably wouldn't have any time after the first ride, but I still wanted to give him a little exercise the other rides. But he's getting to the point here now where we can pretty much just put a saddle on him and lead him out and load him in the trailer and go somewhere and ride. Or just lead him out and get on and leave. And you see the little bit of tightness when I first got on, and I don't necessarily again have to do anything about that, but I have to see it. And once he got over the little bit of tightness, he was fine to just walk off. And today we're going to introduce both reins. And if it wasn't for filming, I personally probably wouldn't do it yet. As I said before, I'd probably ride him another couple weeks. But I don't know that it's bad to do it today. Or you might introduce it from the ground if you wanted before you're on their back. Because you're going to see them get bothered a little bit by it. The one time I wouldn't introduce it, or the two times I wouldn't introduce it, is when he either had too much energy or not enough. And you can see he doesn't understand that at all. I take a hold with both reins, and that's not something that he understands. He's gotten to where he understands one rein pretty well, but two reins, that doesn't make any sense to him. And if we have to, we can always go back to one rein. And that was nice of him. And this is the waiting part. All I do is create a disturbance there with both reins, and then I wait to see what he's going to do. But I sit and wait, and I try to keep my hands quiet, and I don't work my hands, and I don't pull harder. I just sit down and wait. Then I release when he kind of gets done. Going back to what I was saying before, if he has too much energy, he's going to fight it way too much. If he doesn't have enough energy, then he's going to be pretty dull to try to get to move backwards. So you have to kind of watch your energy when you first start to stop or back a horse. Now, I shouldn't say you have to. What I should say is I try to watch their energy. And there's the waiting again. I tell people sometimes when they're doing this with an older horse that's kind of stiff, to just take a hold of the horse and then look somewhere else. Look over there several miles in the distance and ignore your horse. And I think that tries to get you away from trying to make it happen. And I'm using my right hand just a little bit there to help him turn to the left. I don't know if it helped much. And once again, I kind of like my impulsion to come from the back, so that's how I kind of use my hand back behind. And it's certainly too early to try to stop him out of a trot or a lope. And I don't know if you can tell on here, but I'm pretty careful what kind of walk I stop him out of. I try to stop him out of a walk that he's kind of thinking about stopping out of anyway. And for sure a quiet walk. I'm not going to have him where he's just really walking out and then try to get him to stop. We can wait a couple rides for that, and we can wait a couple rides to stop him out of the trot. We like to take a hold of him there, and as he works forward, it kind of continues to get maybe just a little tighter until he finds his way off of it. So the tightness is created in the way that you want your horse to find his own way off of his own pressure, and try to create it in a way that he kind of thinks he's pulling against himself. Now, it might look better if that string wasn't on there. That could be causing a little bit of a deal when we pull with both reins, but that's only a possibility. And like I said before, if we'd have waited maybe a week or so till he got to going better, turning better, I don't think he'd have caused or showed quite as much a reaction to both reins as he is today. But for today, if we can just get a little movement, then we'll be able to quiet and soften that over the next couple rides. But other than showing it for the video, I think that I would sure encourage you to wait just a little bit before you do this. And I probably, if I was just riding him, I know that if I was just riding him, I wouldn't have did it too many times. Even if I'd have started it today, I'd have probably only did it 4 or 5 times or something, or just a handful of times. Now what I'd like him there to the right is just to kind of release and relax, but that didn't quite happen. he stayed a little stiff to the right that last time. He kind of released a little bit a time or two, and then when I asked for a little more, or to kind of continue with what we'd started on, then he kind of got tight. And we'd like that to start to come out of there too, and that's something that we can see we need to work on. And that's looking a little better to me there as we just kind of finished, that his mouth kind of stayed quiet those last 2 or 3 times I asked him to back. I certainly wouldn't tell you that him going around with his mouth open when I pull on him is correct. And we got a little bit of quietness in his mouth there at the end. And there was a few other times when we had a little bit of quietness. This is the 5th ride that this colt's had. And we're back up at my dad's meadow. I think that we probably rode this colt just a little bit in the round pen before we brought him up here, but I couldn't say for sure. There is another horse here, but he's standing behind my daughter, who has the video camera. There's a pretty steep bank that we go down here to get to the river. We're going to go into the river for the first time, or try. So all we do here is just kind of keep pointing and keep him working. We're not trying to go forward. I'm just keeping energy in his body with the flag. And you see him kind of hop there a couple times. It doesn't get if it doesn't get any more than that, I don't worry about it. I just try to kind of continue to be there when he comes down. And you could see him take off that time. That for a while there he was back and forth, and then he kind of took off and went somewhere, and it gave me a chance to give him a reward. And I'm always looking to be able to reward him and let him know he did something good here. And I got to be a little bit strict with him, because where we're going through there is he's got to go in one spot in one little trail, or it wouldn't be real safe for him to go over the edge. If we had a little bigger area, I wouldn't have to keep him quite so confined. We could go back and forth along it. And there he settled. If you notice, some people's horses, or some horses, they don't ever settle down. And I think you can start that with a young horse, or build that in an old horse, by having them work and work a little bit, and then do something you want, and then let them settle. Now, I talked to Justin just a couple of days ago, and as far as he knew, this colt was never next to any water, or was never in a pasture that had water in it. But you can see how he's trying. This colt has a lot of try in him, a lot of bravery. That was a nice try. That's a big change there. And it might only be 2 feet, or it might only be 1.5 inches, but that's a big change in his attitude. And that's when you want to quit. You get that change, you want to quit, you want to reward, you want to sit there quiet. And we don't necessarily want to teach him to eat grass when we're riding, but it's a lot better than some of the things we had a little bit ago. And if you're familiar with Nebraska, this is the North Loop River. I may have said that before. He's got to find that spot, and there he found this spot, and then he got comfortable. As soon as he found that good part of the trail there, then he could go forward. But when he avoided that, then we went side to side, and as soon as he saw that he could get into that good spot that he was in a little bit ago, he just walked right down through that good spot. Because the last time that he got into that spot, he got to stand there, and he got to be quiet, and he liked that. And then the second time that he found that good spot, he went right for it. Now you see a little bit later that this is a sand river, and I don't know that you'd call it quicksand, but there's a lot of spots in this river, and the sand continues to move, and we've had cows stuck in it to where you'd have to dig them out and go down around them with your hands and dig around their legs and keep moving the sand until they can get out. And we've had horses caught in it too. So when we get out in there in one spot, you'll see me get a little abrupt with the colt because I feel him start to sink. And you can ride in the river a lot of places, but you have to keep moving. And then there's places you can stand around, and you can feel it in this river. This is something that even can help this colt build. As you remember in the round pen, he had trouble standing. So we'll let those spots happen to where he does that, and then he stands. And I don't look at it at all as no, he won't go forward. I look at it as he tried, he moved his feet, he looked for something different, and then we stand some more. You can't look at it like he didn't go when you ask him. You have to look at it like he tried. Even if it was only a thought and not a physical movement, you have to see those tries, or you have to try to see those tries. And Ray talked about reward the slightest try. And we'll see some times here, and we've talked about this before, where I might ask something and he has a different thought, and I'll let him do what he was thinking about doing. So I might start to take him one way, and he feels like it's going to work to either stop or go somewhere else. I'll try to feel if I think that that's something that's important to him, and I'll change what I'm doing. And you see him lifting his hind feet there as he gets in that water. And this is all pretty solid here, so we don't have to worry about it. And if I wasn't concerned about the softness, I'd have went all the way across the river and came back. Now you're going to see right in here the spot I'm talking about, where it gets too soft there. Right there he starts sinking. So I hurry him out of there pretty good, and I really got him out of there because he's starting to sink in. And there again is the waiting. He's kind of looking to the left. I took a hold and waited for him to come back to the right. Now, I didn't tell you this before the last tape because I wanted you to try to suffer through it. But if it was me and I was watching the tape, I'd shut my voice off and turn some music on and watch the horse. But I felt if I told you that at the first, you wouldn't listen to anything that I had to say. Yeah, he's having a good time exploring, and with my young horses especially, I like them to explore on their own. And like I said, with this river, I have to do a little directing, and I also have to stay around the camera, or I'd just let him go out and go wherever he wanted to out there, and I'd just go along with him. And I'd do just enough directing to keep him out of trouble or keep it from getting going too much to where I couldn't handle it. There's the thing that I talked about before. I was going to take him to the right, and he said, I want to stick my head in the water again, and he did it. That's the second time. I was going to take him, and he's like, I'm not done pushing my head in the water. I'm like, that's okay. Push your head in the water some more. You're enjoying that. Because after all, I didn't tell him to get out of there. I just asked if he was ready to go. Because I was ready to go, and I asked if he's ready to go, and he told me that he wasn't really ready. Because he had some checking out to do there. He was checking out that water. And if I'd have just pulled on that rein and hit him on the rear and said, I said go, you're going to destroy his confidence, I feel. And then I just let him hurry up out of there. It's kind of fun. And that's Adrian's horse. He was kind of helping there a little bit. And there he found that trail. And once he found the trail, he knew what to do then. So the only real directing I did the second time in was just to hit that little spot in the trail, because he was likely to go off that edge there, and there's a pretty good clump. And as long as I stay to the left here, I'm okay. It's when I get more out to the right where the soft stuff is. But he's having a lot of fun with that water. And that's the rider's job, is to stay out of the horse's way. And what we do sometimes is we start out with, I want to get in the water, and then once we get there, we want all kinds of other things. So I'm just happy he went in the water. This mare here is a warm blood mare. I think she's 5 or 6. And she's owned by Glen Carey Stables in Crescent, Iowa. You can go look at their website. And Glenn and I'll take the liberty to say, have become pretty good friends, I think. And I hadn't did anything with this mare for 2 years, but we kind of helped ride her we rode her 2 years ago. And Glenn had let somebody work with this mare, and they had really messed her up. And this mare was so scared of anybody getting anywhere near the top of her, that she would just lose it and just get really scared and dangerous. And I believe that they'd tried to ride her like one time when she did this all. So we rode her a few times when I was down there in the summer, and then I ended up taking her to my house that winter, and I haven't done anything with her for 2 years. But I spent probably 3 or 4 days laying this mare down different times, and you can see how she remembered it after about 2 years. And with this mare, it really made a change in her. Now, a lot of horses that we lay down don't even need it, and it's kind of senseless. But with this mare, it made a big change in her. It made her a lot happier, a lot safer to be around. But most of the horses we lay down are done for fun or to play around with. But a person wants to be real careful, because you can risk the chance of injury. Now, about 15 years ago in Maryland was the only horse that I hurt that was ever laid up for a while, and he had 4 shoes on, and he reached up with the hind leg and caught the back of his front leg, and they laid him off for a while. But actually, he was a horse like this that really needed it. But if you're going to do this, I would probably recommend that you take the shoes off. Not sure that I would mess around much again with a horse with shoes on. And the thing about this is you can never tell which one will go down easy. And this mare actually went down. As scared as she was, she laid down very easy. So you don't know which one's gonna lay right down and which one could get in a lot of trouble. Sometimes the more gentle horse, or the horse that's been handled more, will object more to being laid down than the horse that hasn't been handled much, or the horse that's scared. And if we did this 2 or 3 more times, this mare would probably just lay right there and not even get up and just take a break. But I think you can see from this what kind of memory horses have. And they remember the good things and they remember the bad things. So if this had been a bad experience for her, I think we would have saw that today. This is Justin's little colt here, the one that we rode in the 5 rides. We rode him those 5 rides last fall, and then turned him out for the winter, and then I got him back in and brought him to Omaha, and I've rode him twice down here. So he's been rode 7 times, and there's no purpose to lay this colt down. And I went back and forth about showing laying a horse down on tape, and the last thing I'd want is for somebody to use it against the horse. But there's no reason to lay this horse down, because he has no problems. Now there's the horse checking me out, and I'm always trying to be conscious that that horse is checking me out there, and I give him a little bit of a pet and a scratch when he checks me out. And you see I have sheepskin around this little hobble there, and I don't lay him down too much with this anymore, but it's something to kind of do. And that was too quick, and I'm certainly not going to try to keep him down here, because he has no idea what he did. The foot came up, and he went down, and he has no understanding how that happened. And we want to build a little bit of understanding and have a little bit of movement before he lays down. There he kind of went down, And then he came back up. And we'd like to get this to where it stays down, and that was nice of him. But we let it back up. We don't hold that down. It goes down and then it can come back up. And then it goes back down with a little pressure, and then we soften our hands. What I'm trying to show here is we don't throw this horse, we don't pull this horse down. We try to get him to a point where he can make a decision to get up or lay down on his own. And you can see how nice he is about not trying to take that leg away from there. Now, if you're riding, it's a good idea to generally keep your fingers closed on the reins. And it is here too, but I'm trying to open my fingers some to show you that I'm not holding tight to the colt and that he's going to go into a complete release. He starts to come up. I just put enough pressure on to make that uncomfortable and a little bit difficult for him to come up. And then he lays down. And as you're going to see later here, he still doesn't have too much understanding of how that happened. And he could either get up or down here. I'd rather that he stayed down and didn't get up when he did that. But I'm not going to fight him at all and keep him there. We're just going to apply a little pressure on him to see if it works for him to lay over on his side. And there he is checking me out. And this is it's a bad situation for him to be in. And if he's wanting to check me out, I'm going to let him check me out. And I'm going to get my hands back away from him, and I'm going to be real quiet and let him see if he can work on that situation, because that's a good spot for him to be in too, because he's at the mercy of everything around him. He has no defenses here. He wants to take a look and see what's on his foot. And we'll give him time to look at that. And this is a colt that's got his mind wide open. You can see he doesn't say, this is what I'm going to do, and do it. He looks here, he looks there, and he's trying to figure this problem out. And he's in a situation that he doesn't understand. And instead of doing something about it, he just thinks, and he rolls it over in his mind and over in his mind. And there he looks again. Now that leg is not tied up, and if he wants to get up, he can get up. The slack will come right through that rope. There's no tying that leg down. Once he starts to get up, he can just come right on up. And there he's close to getting up. You see the decisions he's got to make. And I'm not going to force him to make them decisions. I'm just going to keep finding ways to help him make decisions. It's open for him to lay to the right side. It's open to him to lay over to the right. And if I can, I'll put that foot back down for him, but I won't hold it down. So once again, it's open for him to lay on his right side. And I'm certainly not going to punish him for nibbling on me there. But I'm going to move my arm just enough that he doesn't get a hold of me. And he didn't find it. He didn't find that spot to lay over on his right side. But it wasn't because he didn't try. He looked and he tried and he looked and he tried to do what I asked him, but he didn't make it. And he got up. Now, the purpose of laying a horse down is not necessarily to get a horse to lay down. The purpose of laying a horse down is to have him work through some things. And if we just want to teach a horse to lay down, it was working really good with that rope. But we're trying to make this a little bit of a learning experience here if we're going to show it. And generally speaking, if it wouldn't happen that way, it's not gonna be that easy very often. So we're gonna put this strap on it, and what we'd usually do is we'd like this colt to move around a little bit and to walk around and learn to accept that restraint. And that restraint there is no fun. Now, I learned how to lay down a horse over the phone, and it wasn't pretty. And this horse and I, he'd been rode for several years, and he was pretty well broke. And him and I were both covered in sweat. I mean, there wasn't a dry place on either one of us before I got him laid down. And I called Tom back on the phone, Tom Dorrance, and he told me, he goes, well, sometimes you want to start with a horse that hasn't been handled as much. Because the horse that's been handled a lot, he learns a pattern of how he responds to you. And laying down wasn't in that. And of course, maybe Tom was just trying to cover up my ineptness at doing it, but it made me feel better. But I've seen that happen before right here in Omaha. And I don't think Dr. Smith at Chance Ridge will mind if I mention this. But I laid a couple colts down there when I was riding some horses for him. And I came back 6 months or a year later, and his wife Cindy really got a chuckle out of it, and they're horse people, and Dr. Smith and another vet was there, had the same ordeal that I had, and they were both covered with sweat. And when we came back and went over it the next year, then they're like, oh, I see. And it's worked a little bit better for them since then. But these are spots to just leave them alone and let them work at it a little bit. And you need to keep in mind that the idea generally for laying a horse down is not to get him on the ground. The idea is the things that he goes through before he goes down and the learning experiences that he gets. And we'll see him try to bite my foot a little bit there. And once again, I just kind of move my foot back a little bit. And he's real close there. See if he makes it or not. And there he made it. And this is a seat belt, and we just reach up and pop it loose. And we'll try this same thing we were doing from before, but we'll try it from the other side. And he's used to being pulled on with the halter a little bit. He's never been pushed on the way I pushed on him with the neck. So I'll see if I can help him in that same way with the halter. But it didn't work out, and he got up. And that's not a problem at all. He had two 2 or 3 choices to make. He could kind of stay where he was, he could get up, or he could lay down on his right side. And none of those choices were right or wrong. And I was trying to help him lay down on the right-hand side, but I wasn't demanding it. If you're going to try this, try to get the horse comfortable of being down on one leg. And maybe that should be your only goal the first time that you attempt it with a horse, and then quit there. The one thing I'd like you to see throughout this series of tapes is hopefully the lack of punishment. And even though he kicked that off his leg and jumped in the air, all I can tell is that I'm sorry that this is difficult. And the last thing I'm gonna tell him is, you're a loser and you didn't lay down, and I'm gonna give you a jerk and tell you should have laid down. What I want to tell him is this is tough, and I know this is tough. And once again, when he bites my foot, I just move my foot out of the way. And we're not trying to get him to lay down here. All we're trying to do is get him to settle down and then come back to being down on the one leg. Whatever my horse does, I just kind of try to stay with him. And going back to which ones lay down and which ones don't, it can be pretty difficult to tell before they do it which one will do what. And it also becomes, is it worth it to even try it? There's 2 reasons that it can be worth it to try it. And one is for a learning experience for the person to understand more how a horse operates. And the other is in cases like the warm blood mare, where it might have taken years to get the mare to be comfortable on top of her. And I really shouldn't say that, years. But it could have taken a long time to get that mare to be comfortable with somebody up alongside of her, halfway on the saddle and then on her back. But certainly with this little colt, as far as his riding and getting on and off and things like that, there was not a reason to do this with him. And I hadn't done it with him, and most of the horses, almost all the horses I lay down now are for demonstration purposes because people want to see it. So they'll bring a horse, or there'll be a horse there, or sometimes I have a horse there and that horse hasn't been laid down, so for demonstration purposes we'll lay that horse down. A lot of times what I do, and would have made this a little, there he went, a little easier, if they've been rode some, I'll use my bridle on them and kind of bring them back with my bridle. But that's something that could get you in a lot of trouble too. And you can see now all the restraints off of him, and he's free to get up if he needs to. And you see the movement there, and as soon as he got too worried, I stopped and I quit walking. Because I didn't want him to get up, not because of me right then. Now, sometimes I'll walk around him to help him get up. Now, I've went off and on whether to ever have a video of a horse laying down, because it's kind of hard to understand. And if you're there, we can talk about it and questions and go back and forth on the reasons and what things might have went on. But I decided to go ahead and do this because the Nebraska Horse Expo is coming up, and I'm going to offer it there. But I don't know if I will again or not. And we'll work on him. This is Wednesday, and the expo starts on Friday, so if we get a chance, we'll lay him down again tomorrow. And then over the expo, we'll lay him down maybe a time or two every day, and we can get a look at maybe the progress that he makes as he learns to lay down and be comfortable with it, and learns how to get down with something a hold of him. Now, he can go lay down without anything a hold of him, and that's not too hard, but when something has a hold of him, like that seat belt, then he has to figure out how to lay down with that on there. And there my hand stopped because his nose moved. Because he's telling me he's uncomfortable. There he's uncomfortable, so I kind of hesitate a little bit. And now I'll see if he can sit up. And we'll see if it works a little better now to get him to roll back over. Ray Hunt called it the teeter, and you can see he's right on it there. He could go either way here. If we put just a little pressure, you see his body almost start to roll. And we like to get him right on what Ray would call that teeter and see if he can go either way. And he's just kind of almost, we want to get him here to where he's just almost kind of suspended out there in the middle of nowhere like there, and then he goes on over. The last thing we want to do is put this horse down, especially at this point where he is trying his hardest. So I don't just say, okay, you lay down on your side. And you seen him look at me with with his nose. And I just left him and let him get up on his own. I'm clear over at the fence, not paying any attention to him, hanging the seatbelt up. And you saw him look away from me, a little bit of, I don't know if I want you around me, and that's fine. I don't know if I'd want me around me, especially after what we just did. But I waited, and then he said, okay, it's okay. Then we'll wait on his feet before we walk off. We just had a strap on his leg.